a wonderful panel with Maggie, Jori, and Megan. Part of what we want to do this morning is talk a little bit about what we do in the field. ICS and OT is a very interesting space. It's relatively new for many security folks out there. And so I wanted to kind of go down the line with each of these panelists and talk a little bit about what their experience is, what they do within ICS OT, and maybe talk about what does ICS and OT mean to them. And so to kind of kick this off, Megan, would you like to talk a little bit about what your role is, what you do, and what ICS and OT means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tony. And it's good to be here with everyone today. So, gosh, it's like where to start. I can talk about my current role. So I'm the Vice President, Chief Product Security Officer for the energy management business within Schneider Electric. And I am responsible for the wing-to-wing product security program. So kind of a, maybe a little bit of an oversimplified way that I explain it is that think of product security in a traditional sense in two sides of a coin, and that it is the standards, the security requirements, the testing and the validation, the secure development lifecycle, the pen testing, static analysis, kind of all of those great things that we do to ensure that we ship a secure product on one side of the coin. And the flip side of the coin is where things get really interesting from a business standpoint, in that we get to select security features that we believe will delight the customer and make their security experience better by designing security into the product. So think of things like certificate authority and secure boot and other mechanisms, event logging, for example, and controllers, things that have existed within the IT world for quite some time. We get to make choices from a business and kind of a customer satisfaction and product quality standpoint to build those things directly into the product. So I'd say product security is different than IT security in the sense that IT is really concerned with protecting the entire enterprise network, the intellectual property, the users on the network, your traditional IT interactions, your SOC analyst kind of monitoring for threats coming into that network. And product security is really where the rubber meets the road and what is possible in differentiating a company in today's world when it comes to what it provides in terms of products, services, and everything that it wants to offer to its customers. So I think that I'm trying to think of something catchy to say, but I'm not that clever this morning, and that product security has all the cool things of IT with a twist of being a little bit business savvy and a little bit more customer focused. And I'd say that a little bit more is normally riding on the line, and that what you produce, you're ultimately accountable for because it's going to be living in a different environment. And from the time that product ships until the time that that product is living in the customer environment and ultimately disposed of and all of those things, and to the point that it's no longer used, the risk to that product we can expect to exponentially increase. So you've got one shot to do it right when the product is still in your environment. And then, of course, you can do patches and things like that and provide services around the life cycle of the product once it's in the customer environment. But it's so important to do as much as you can on the front end and kind of looking into that crystal ball, trying to predict the future threats that may come against that product and doing everything that you possibly can from the onset. So it's a tremendously large world with tremendously cool challenges and opportunities and delights and frustrations on a daily basis. But I love it, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah. Thank you, Megan. Jori, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do in the ICS OT security space?
Absolutely. So I have a long and sordid past. I actually started out on the IT side of the house many years ago as a bench tech. Kind of worked my way up into architecture, system design, and networks, and that naturally led me over to security. And I've been in security for the last 15 years. I would say that the first half of my career was, we'll call it OT adjacent, and the second half of my career was really focused on OT and ICS. I made a move to the dark side probably about 9 years ago. which I would call technical sales or sales engineering for the vendor space. And I've worked for companies such as FireEye, CrowdStrike, and Dragos. Really, I'm way more of a geek than I am a VP of sales. It's hard to read that title. As far as ICS and OT, to me, I think it always goes back to utilities and physical things. There's a little bit of wonderment for me anytime that I walk into a large, we'll say, energy, like a dam, for example. I mean, there's bolts the size of my head. That's amazing, the way that these things work. And the systems that protect them or I should say run them and protect them are really interesting as well, just because of the amount of simplicity, but also complexity in those environments. And I think as a whole, security is really challenged around that simplicity itself. People think that ICS is complicated, and in ways it can be, but a lot of the systems that we look at as a whole they're very simple. I mean, a lot of the basic controllers that we see, it's ladder logic. Authentication isn't a thing, doesn't exist. So it takes a much more thought out approach to securing those environments. And let's say ramifications or impact is felt a lot more inside ICS and OT than you see in some of the IT environments. And I don't want to say that money isn't necessarily an important part of everyone's life, but when we see Amex, for example, saying, if I have a server go down, it costs me X dollars a day or X dollars an hour, or even X dollars a minute, that's an impact that we see when you see a power generation site go down and you see a section of the grid or rolling brownouts throughout a city. That's a physical impact. People feel that, you see it. It's something that I think really resonates with people more than anything else. And I will say, in my technical career, I have been described as the computer guy so many times I can't even count. When I started actually working on ICS and OT systems, it immediately changed, because you can, for example, my mother-in-law can say, my son-in-law protects our energy, and it immediately resonates with people over being the computer guy.
How would you guys define ICS? I mean, just for the audience today, what is ICS and what is OT?
Ooh, hot topic. I think we're probably going to debate this because it depends on how you look at it. I see it as circles. OT really is kind of an expansive circle, an umbrella that covers everything. ICS and some of the other systems that we have in there specific to SCADA, for example, are within that OT, that operations technology bucket. I kind of see OT as, the easiest way to describe it is IT assets in an ICS environment. Okay.
Yeah. And people talk about the term SCADA. SCADA. How do you see SCADA and how it fits with those different circles?
SCADA is only one small. It's really only one small portion of ICS and OT as a whole. And in fact, most of the systems that I see on a day-to-day basis aren't using SCADA. They might be part of a SCADA environment, but they're not necessarily, that's not the whole sum of it. Honestly, they're very, very, I would say 30% of what I see on a day is actually SCADA, which is very, very, it's very focused on, that's a hard one. I'm trying to think of how to separate it from a systems perspective. So it's really around that supervisory and control. It is only specific to the operation of a device, if that makes sense. So it's very low level. And a lot of times when we talk SCADA, we're talking serial. This isn't IP connected technologies.
So, when you guys look at your jobs, I mean, Megan, you have a slightly different perspective. You're really building security in. Jori, you're really helping. It sounds like you're really helping to offer solutions to market to secure their install base, to secure their overall systems, and so it sounds like that's a very collaborative nature. How do you guys see the need for built-in versus bolt-on? I know that's a very controversial topic. when people talk about cybersecurity. When you think ICS OT, what nuances are there of built-in versus bolt-on, and how do you see those things coming together? And what are some of the things that they should be really looking for in some of these solutions or products? Now, I guess, Megan, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I think that it's helpful to scope the conversation in terms of what ICS vendors and SCADA providers provide unto themselves, like what is their bread and butter, what are they traditionally really good at making, whether those are PLCs, controllers, HMIs, sensors, kind of the bread and butter, whether you're in a process or a discrete environment that make up what, you know, and Googled if you're not familiar with it, the Purdue model. We speak the language of the Purdue model, where level 5 is more like your enterprise company-wide IT network, and you're moving down into the DMZ zones where the networks are hopefully segmented a good amount, and you get into process control level 4, level 3 with your HMIs and your traditional SCADA, and you move down from there into level 2 and level 1 devices. And that is our world. That is what we're really good at providing. And we can build security into those products to be able to kind of have wing-to-wing secure communications. That's a big topic that we're all kind of moving towards. These environments exist for 10, 20 years. So, you know, Eric Byers would say, we're not going to rip and replace this equipment anytime soon. It's meant to be there. It's functioning. It's doing their job. It's producing cornflakes, or it's producing, you know, energy for the grid, or it's controlling a dam. These things are built to last, and it speaks to the quality of the products. And we can build it in, right? And we can patch, and we can do things after the fact to help the customer. But there are some areas like intrusion detection systems, IDS. If you look at Clarity or a Dragos or a Nozomi, where they provide a specialty product that company built that device to be able to analyze network traffic and detect anomalous behavior on that network. In other words, activities and actions, or something that is not supposed to be there, and they're going to alert the customer that something bad is in their environment, so that they can hopefully take action on that and do things in a safe way to remediate that issue. And so there is a unique skill set that is involved in providing this type of service, especially when it comes down to incident response and flyaway teams, and being able to, you know, if a customer goes down and they may not know for an hour or two that cyber has anything to do with the situation. All they know is that something is what I call JDLR, just doesn't look right, okay? And they're gonna pick up the phone and they're gonna start making some phone calls. And when that happens, you know, I think that it's great that there are companies out there like Clarity, Nozomi, and Dragos that provide the technology to help them detect these issues and get visibility onto their network, as well as to know when JDLR is really APT, right? When you have something more nefarious in there. And in many cases, you may be dealing with kind of commodity hacking issues like ransomware or viruses that get on the system because of kind of poor system hygiene. But in those unique cases where it is something more targeted, you need to bring in the experts, if you will, to help you with that issue and to kick the bad guys out and hopefully plug the holes up in your network so that that doesn't happen again. And vendors can work ahead of time with these ICS security advisors to kind of create customized solutions for the customers. And then, you know, hope it doesn't happen, but, you know, knock on wood, if something does happen, you can work afterwards running responses and things like that together and coming up with creative solutions to make sure that that type of thing doesn't impact your customer again. So that's kind of my perspective. What do you think, Jori?
I think as a whole, it's really an ecosystem. So it's not just the vendors that we have and the responders, but when we get to actual product specific things that you can do all the way down to the controller, it really does matter. It goes all the way to the people as well. I mean, it's probably a little cliche and overused, but if I bought an alarm system for my house and left the front door open, it's not very helpful. So I think it's important that we all work together. The systems themselves have to be secure. the individuals who are using those systems need to understand the risk of what their impact is, how they use that system, and how they can, just in their daily tasks, be more secure, as well as the, we'll call bolt-on products. I think especially in ICS, because the systems themselves, as Megan said, some of them are set to run for 30 to 40 years. These are solutions that are built and not touched ever again. Unless something breaks, they don't touch these systems. So it's not like they're regularly patched or anything along those lines. And when you get into systems where authentication isn't a thing, systems that are running Windows XP or, God forbid, in some cases, Windows NT, there's not much you can do other than to properly segment using the Purdue model is a great way to do that, to segment your critical environments and to definitely disconnect your IT from your OT in as much of a physical manner as you can. But the vendor products, I think, that are really important around visibility, because when you're inside that space, it's not about, I'm going to go patch an NT box. It's not about, I'm going to go upgrade the firmware on a PLC that's, running a safety system for a generation environment. It is about understanding the communications in between them, how they're interacting with each other. And if you see things that are odd, which I think gets into a whole other debate around anomaly detection versus signatures and so on and so forth. But really, visibility as a whole, it doesn't matter if it's anomaly or just generalized data, all of it is helpful to understand what's going on inside that environment.
Lots of great nuggets in there. I think when you look at the install base that we're talking about, 30, 40 years, that is not uncommon. To go rip and replaces, billions, if not trillions of dollars of investment, just given the usage of these technologies. And I think, Jori, the way you said, the way you talked earlier about those large bolts, right? People that built these systems 20, 30 years ago really thought of these technologies as another bolt, another mechanical device that you fix it when you replace it. It wasn't associated with that IT equipment, right? And so it wasn't given that same life cycle. It wasn't given that same governance. And so that's really been a transformational shift for a lot of asset owners in the space, and has really started to, it's proven to be very laggard to others. I guess, Megan and Jori, why is there this sudden shift? I want to say sudden. Why do you think there's a more urgency today around security? What are some of the threats that we're seeing that's causing or accelerating this focus on cybersecurity?
I think there's two parts to that question, I think, as far as from my opinion. One is that you just, honestly, that was very eloquently put. And I think what we've done around ICS as a whole has been reactive, right? So we don't have individuals driving in a truck to 72 substations anymore. We've connected them to the internet, right? We didn't think about that when they were originally installed or built. They just got plugged in, which is disturbing in some ways. But also, it makes sense. I mean, that's a lot of time and effort, and you have a lot less visibility. And I mean, when a substation went down, a customer's going to have to call and say, I have an outage, and they're going to have to send a truck out. We don't have that anymore because we've connected it. There's a lot of really good things that have come out of that. But I think the other side of the coin is more just around cyber as a whole. It doesn't matter what industry you work in. It doesn't, everything's connected. I mean, we carry computers around in our pocket. What's the easiest way for nefarious, we'll say nefarious actors to make money or make impact or influence? It's through cyber campaigns. And we definitely crossed a threshold worldwide around what you can affect from a cyber attack. And if you can have a physical effect, and we're getting into nation state talk at this point, but if you can affect something physical and take, even just to cause short outages or to even just a looming threat of a grid going down, even if it is localized, that's scary stuff. It gets in people's heads. And I think it's been out in the media so long at this point that I think it's almost attracted attention of threat actors.
And thank you, Jori. And I'll just note that our third panelist, Maggie, was able to join us, and we apologize, some technical difficulties there. Welcome, Maggie. Well, Maggie is connected. Megan, any thoughts on what you're seeing as well around activity and threats, and why this urgency in the last few years?
Sure. I mean, it's such a broad question. So it's kind of one of these things, where do you start? I mean, if we were to answer the question from today's moment in time, we would definitely have to take note of the media attention around advanced persistent threats and the potential for what was viewed kind of during the 1990s as viruses and maybe things impacting traditional enterprise networks. That was scary. I mean, it was definitely the threat of enterprise computer networks and financial systems going down. And that's where people kind of oriented their minds to be the problem. But then you had 9/11 happen, and you had a lot of focus on emergency preparedness and homeland security and kind of traditional guns, guards, and gates. And today you see the convergence of both cyber and the potential for kinetic disruption. And it disrupts and it challenges our traditional, especially if you take an American-centric view, it challenges our security theory and the fact that we've always in America thought if the enemy can't get to us, right? If they can't send bombs over here, then they can't disrupt our day of life too much. And the concept of someone in China or Russia or wherever in the world really being able to attack us, and conversely us being able to attack them, because that happens too. It's a different mindset orientation. And I think that until you saw something like Stuxnet happen, or Black Energy with the attacks on the Ukrainian grid, or Trisis, it was like to the way that human beings view security is that until something happens, we pretty much view the risk of it as zero, when we know that risk exists on a scale of 0 to 1. And at any one given point of time, the risk is probably not 0. And until it happens, it's not 1 yet. But we're not very good at calibrating the percent of likelihood or imagination that it would take for these events to occur. And now that they have, it has awakened a part of our fear that perhaps didn't exist before that. And also the ambiguity around cyber in and of itself. The term cyber was invented in the late 70s. It came out of a science fiction novel. And the term itself, cyber, means absolutely nothing. I think that most people have heard this, but the term itself just means something that is it has as much ambiguity as it is evocative, right? It's just a kind of a catchy term, and the nature of this problem, I think, ties back to kind of this issue entirely.
And I think just to build on that a little bit, you talked about, Pete, the rationalization of risk, and I think that awareness, to your point, was really initiated back in some of those earlier events, and even more recently, not to sound like a broken record, ransomware is such a big deal, and we're seeing ransomware impact a number of what we'll call traditional ICS or OT environments, disrupting production, stopping critical services. Jori talked about a number of critical services, and Megan, just like you as well, when you talked about disrupting our way of life. And so we're certainly seeing evidence of more cyber activity. We're seeing some of those impacts that didn't bother us in the past start to hit home, hit bottom line, most importantly, and people start to incorporate that into their overall enterprise risk frameworks. So I certainly think there's been a tremendous mindset shift in the last 5 or so years, and hence the number of Clarities, Nozomis, Dragos, that industry of booming technologies of how do people help them get set up and starting to monitor what they have, and we're seeing the investment, we're seeing the reaction. So lots of good activity. It's a very interesting space. To kind of just pivot on that term APT, have a little fun. What is your favorite APT and why? Who wants to go first?
I'll I'll take it, I guess. So it's actually interesting. I don't know if I would actually put APTs as a second. I find it really interesting. You know, you mentioned ransomware. It's such a commodity thing, but we see it popping up everywhere. It's every system all over the place. But if I had to pick an APT, I actually have two that rank the same. So the first was Shamoon. It was really interesting the way that they went about attacking Saudi's infrastructure. And it wasn't just the infrastructure. I mean, that was what was kind of interesting about it. They had enough knowledge around ICS systems to know that they could disrupt, but also going after government systems as well. So it was a very well thought out, I think, APT as a whole. And the second one would be Triton or Trisis. And that one, I honestly think we never got to see what it would evolve into, but it showed an amazing amount of knowledge of ICS systems and well thought. I mean, the tradecraft behind that is really interesting. And I think a little frightening as a whole.
What about you, Megan?
I'm an APT 28 girl all the way. Fancy Bear, also known as Sandworm. We saw that activity beginning 2013, 2014 timeframe with the first wave of black energy that was targeted malware. It was kind of the first wave that was targeted against HMIs from a few different vendors. They clearly knew what they were doing. They went in through like HVAC systems and things like that. This was good work, right? And then now they've even pivoted against attacks on the Olympics when they were held in South Korea and mobile apps. I mean, they are like the Swiss Army knife of APTs. They are a very skillful group, and they're talented. And I mean, they even did, of course, the Ukrainian grid attacks is probably their most notable work, but it seems like they're just a really dynamic group. I mean, I'm not a fan, of course, of advanced persistent threats, but I mean, if you kind of look at what group is kind of doing the most stuff in the most interesting way, again, I'd say that they're the Swiss Army knife of APTs.
That's great. Thank you very much. You know, we're coming up with 5 minutes left, and I think we really highlighted on, you know, what is ICS, what is OT, you know, the significance of these systems in our everyday lives and the services they provide. And so I appreciate both of your context on, you know, what are your, like, how you support that mission, how you come at it from different angles. You know, one of the things that I think is important for us to kind of leave here for our audience today is, you know, if there's interest in getting more into this field and joining in on this mission to protect these critical services, you know, what are some of the roles and what are some of the ways that other members of the security community can get involved, and what does it look like? I know Megan, you work for a vendor. Jori, you worked for other types of vendors as well. But what are some of these roles, and what do they look like?
I think there's quite a few ways that you can start to really understand ICS as a whole. From a role perspective, you know, from vendors, there's post and pre-sales engineering positions, which are a really interesting way to see a lot of different environments. And that's a great way to get an introduction and really be able to see things from an effective stance. Another way is a lot of local energy co-ops or energy companies inside your state. I guarantee they're actually having small get-togethers. We actually have two, I live in Arizona. We actually have two cyber labs here in town that are specific to ICS that are run by two of our different generation companies. And that's a great way to get into things. And honestly, a lot of the individuals running those labs originated in IT, so they can help you transition. I think the one thing I will say is that IT and OT are very similar. There's a lot of things that we can use in both. It's just what systems are in each environment and the amount of impact. There's a lot of things you can't do in an ICS environment that you could in IT. You're not going to walk into a power generation plant and do an IP scan. It could literally knock over a PLC. And there's little things that you can learn along the way. But I would definitely say check out your local resources. There's a lot of security groups out there. As far as the roles, there are a lot of utilities right now hiring SOC analysts, and they're specifically looking to monitor these ICS environments as well.
Thanks, Jori. Megan, what are your thoughts?
I think I'm going to bring some hope to kind of two different audiences. The first audience I want to speak to is the audience that I came from, and that I didn't start out with an IT background. I came into industrial control systems security from a traditional homeland security, guns, guards, and gates, as well as emergency management background. And I kind of established a name and a reputation for myself as being someone that if you needed a response plan, if you needed an incident run, I could do that for you. I could figure out how to, what people do you have, what roles do you need? Everyone has a role and everyone should be allowed to play that role. And I was an expert in incident command system and organizing resources for whatever type of response, a hurricane, a bomb, it doesn't matter. And I was recruited into this field for that purpose. And I said, hey, like, I don't think that you've got the right person. I'm not a cyber person. I don't think I'm qualified for the job. And they said, yeah, actually you are, because the skill sets that you have, we can't teach other people. We can teach you cyber, we can teach you the technical. And so if you're kind of on a periphery of security or law enforcement or emergency management or whatever, get in through like a response position. Just say, hey, I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to start from the bottom. And you may say, well, gosh, it could take me 4 or 5 years before I know anything about cyber. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But you know what? Those 4 or 5 years are going to pass by in your life no matter what. So just do it. The second audience that I'll speak to are the IT folks, kind of the folks doing SOC analyst work or AppSec or anything like that. Take those skills, shadow someone in your company that's working on the OT side. I can tell you right now, they would appreciate the help. Just reach out, try to talk to your HR and see if you can get into a stretch role. We definitely need more people here. I think that even if we were able to fill every single role that was open today, it's something like we would still have a 20 million job deficit by 2025 in this area. So there is a place for you. There is heart for you here. This is a warm community. We need you here. So just make the leap of faith. Just Shia LaBeouf. Just do it. So that's what I'd have to say.
Thank you, Megan. And I can't say it any better than that. There's tremendous opportunity. It's a critical mission, and there's so many different ways and backgrounds that you can enter this space. With that, we are right on time. And I just want to say, thank you, Megan, thank you, Jori, and thank you, Maggie and the team for trying to work through the technical issues. You're here in spirit, and we hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day at CornCon this year. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, Maggie. We were trying to get her on, but we are, thank you to our moderator and panelists. We're going to take a short intermission and we'll be back with the next track speaker. Thank you.
Thank you.